Welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and I share videos on the topic of long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome and mind-body approaches that can be used to help those conditions and other mind-body conditions. I also offer coaching to people who are interested in applying this approach to their own recovery and need some support doing that. So today's video, I wanted to talk about post-exertional malaise, how to think about this in respect to it being a mind-body symptom, and also how to manage post-exertional malaise as a mind-body symptom. So I think this symptom, because it's a little bit different, because sometimes there's a delayed onset, can feel trickier to manage or trickier to think about as a mind-body symptom. So I think it's helpful to really just break it down and reflect on how you're managing it and also what you're thinking about this particular symptom. So what I'm sharing in this video is not medical or mental health advice. I'm sharing ideas based on my own experience and based on my reading about a mind-body approach. Post-exertional malaise is really challenging for many people because naturally it can be a little bit concerning, the prospect of getting this fatigue that comes on days after doing activity. For some people it might be 24 hours, for other people it might be longer. For me, normally it would come on the next day if it was going to come on, so I didn't wait multiple days before I got some type of post-exertional malaise. Normally I would get some clues pretty early on that the fatigue was going to get worse or that I would get this post-exertional malaise. But for others it can seem unpredictable, and when something seems unpredictable it can cause fear. I think one thing to think about is what your beliefs are about post-exertional malaise right now and how much fear it causes when it comes up, or what you tend to think when post-exertional malaise appears or gets worse for you. Because often with a mind-body approach, we're really trying to reduce the fear related to that particular symptom. One of the things that I noticed when I was recovering was that sometimes I would do an activity and I would feel good, I'd feel excited, I'd feel optimistic, and I would feel like this is going to go well, and whilst I was doing the activity I still felt optimistic. And then after the activity is when I would start to feel worse. For instance, walking around my garden, I started to feel worse, and then the next day it really hit me even harder with the symptoms. When we've had an experience like that a number of times before, it's very natural to feel fearful about doing any activity that might cause the same reaction, because it's very unpleasant, it's scary. It, of course, feels pretty awful when you go into that state of extreme fatigue or shutdown, or for some people they get migraines. I used to often get migraines when I was reacting to some type of activity. So to begin with, thinking about what your current beliefs are, or what you tend to think when this comes on, is helpful just to reflect on. I think it's quite helpful to think about post-exertional malaise in the same way as we think about any other mind-body symptom. So even though there's a delayed response, we can think about it in the same way. So whilst we're doing the activity, we have to really consider, how do I feel doing this activity? And if I feel great and happy and excited, could there be another part of me that is experiencing fear? Could there be some level of subconscious fear or subconscious even prediction, because this has happened so many times in the past that it will happen again, that the post-exertional malaise will come on after doing this? Often, because it's happened so many times in the past, we can end up sort of bracing ourselves, thinking, oh, when's it going to come on? after doing something. And there's different levels to this. For some people, it's very conscious. They're constantly thinking about the possibility of getting post-exertional malaise. For other people, it's less on a conscious level and more on a subconscious level. And our body can also react to some triggers because our brain has learned and our subconscious has learned that that activity is dangerous. So this could be happening under the radar, where it's not really in our consciousness that we are predicting it. And maybe the term "we are predicting it" isn't even accurate, because we're not the ones predicting it. It's our brain has learned that this particular activity or doing this amount of activity is dangerous, and that our body needs to shut down afterwards. So we're trying to teach the brain and the body that actually we are safe, we're okay, that we can tolerate that level of activity. So when the symptoms come up, it is really important and helpful to respond by managing as best as you can the fear that comes along with those symptoms, the doubt, the thoughts that it's out of your control, that you're stuck, so that you can start to feel safe and feel okay that the symptoms are there. The more that you can feel okay and safe with symptoms being there, the less fear, conscious or subconscious, we will have about doing activity, because the prospect of getting symptoms after activity is not as much of a concern. And when it's less of a concern, our nervous system is less likely to react. So the response is really important. For me, one of the most helpful things was just acknowledging, okay, a part of me feels really anxious by having these symptoms. A part of me feels disappointed or frustrated that I have these symptoms coming up. So it's holding some space for those feelings and for those parts, and letting those parts express what they want to express, but not letting them take over and run the show, and not letting myself believe the thoughts related to fear or related to concern or despair that might come up because of those symptoms. The second part is really to think about what state you're in when you're doing this activity that might then bring on post-exertional malaise. So for some people, like I described before, they feel optimistic, they feel excited, they feel good about doing a particular activity. And for these people, I think it can be really helpful just to check in beforehand and notice, is there any other part of them that does feel a bit concerned? Or is there any part of them that is not actually feeling confident about doing that activity? Or are there any other triggers, psychological triggers, that might be impacting you in the background? So have you had a difficult conversation with someone recently? Have you been thinking about something that's quite stressful? Is there anything else that could be a potential trigger for your nervous system at the moment? Could there be any emotion you're not actually acknowledging or dealing with? So it could, for instance, be the case that someone close to you called you recently and you already have a difficult relationship with that person, and maybe you didn't say what you really wanted to say, or you felt angry but you didn't express that anger. So it's really reflecting on, could there be another trigger aside from this particular activity that might be impacting my nervous system? With post-exertional malaise, it can be really difficult and really hard to have a symptom come on a number of hours or days after that particular activity, and it can feel like it's out of your control. So really what you want to do is take back control in terms of understanding why it's there. So finding some type of a trigger. Was it that you felt somewhat anxious doing the activity? Was it that you were continuously thinking that you would probably get some type of post-exertional malaise after the activity? Was it that there was another potential psychological trigger? Could there be any emotions you're not acknowledging or not letting yourself become aware of, that you're just pushing forward and you're in your normal way of being, which might be putting emotions to the side. And how can you start to work on this? So finding the trigger, then responding well to the symptoms when they come. So really responding as though you are somewhat expecting these symptoms. And it's not to say that you are trying to predict that they'll come, but that you're not surprised that they've come, and that you're okay that these symptoms are there, because you know that you can feel okay and feel safe with them. And that's the ideal situation. But even if you don't feel like you can really feel safe with having symptoms, that you know it's something you are working on. It's something that you can build and grow and become more comfortable with having symptoms when they are really scary and difficult. And it can bring up disappointment, it can bring up loss, it can bring up sadness. So it's really also about allowing yourself to express the emotions that come alongside the symptoms, but not getting stuck in them, not sort of letting it become overwhelming and getting stuck into a vicious cycle of thinking negatively about how you're stuck, or thinking about the anxiety of potentially getting worse, or of these symptoms lasting for a long time. So this is the exact same way that we might respond to any symptom that comes up. So even if a symptom doesn't come up after activity, or if symptom gets worse and you're not sure why, it will still be the exact same response, that you're trying to notice, is there any emotional trigger, and then respond well to the symptoms, knowing that the more that you can build this association of safety within your body when you have symptoms, that the less likely it's going to be that those symptoms will come up in future. Of course, they might come up again, and that's okay, because you can continue to respond well, but it gets easier with time. Another thing that can be really helpful is listing all of the inconsistencies and evidence that you have that this is a mind-body symptom. So listing the evidence that there are inconsistencies with your post-exertional malaise. Maybe when your illness began, the post-exertional malaise came within 24 hours, and now it comes within 48 hours. Maybe the post-exertional malaise doesn't always come as a result of increasing physical activity. Maybe it's related to other triggers as well. Have you ever had this increase in symptoms without doing activity a few days before, or without the typical triggers happening a few days before? This can help us start to decouple the association between activity and symptoms or post-exertional malaise. And we want to decouple that association because we want to feel safer with doing activity in the long run. So if we have the narrative that this activity caused post-exertional malaise, then it's going to be harder to feel safe with doing activity. And it's natural that we'd make that association, because that often is when post-exertional malaise comes. It comes after an activity. But thinking about post-exertional malaise in the same way as any other mind-body symptom can be really helpful to just reduce that level of fear around having post-exertional malaise, and also feeling more in control that this is okay. This, even though it's difficult to experience this, that you can manage when it happens. Another thing is that sometimes some of this is not fully conscious, and our body is reacting because our brain has an association with particular activities as being dangerous. So it can be helpful to remind yourself that other people have also recovered from this particular symptom and this particular challenge, and that you can too. And that even though your post-exertional malaise might come on in a different way to someone else's, that it is still the same process that's happening behind the scenes, and that we can treat it like another mind-body symptom. And it might not go away overnight, but with time it can reduce. So let me know what your thoughts are on post-exertional malaise, and if there's anything that I didn't mention in this video that you found helpful in terms of applying a mind-body approach to post-exertional malaise. A lot of the mind-body books like Unlearn Your Pain or the Mind-Body Prescription, they focus on pain, and they're really, really helpful books, and I would recommend diving into books and podcasts like the Like Mind, Like Body podcast. But often post-exertional malaise and fatigue are not spoken about in great detail, and sometimes because of that, it can feel as though we're not sure what to do about it, this particular symptom, because it shows up differently to how pain might show up, or how another symptom might show up when it comes on straight after or with that particular trigger. But I think the more we can just break it down and simplify it to understand that this is still a mind-body symptom, and all of the other information applies, even though it might come on with a delay. That's what I have found really helpful, and I know others have found that really helpful too in overcoming this. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. If you're interested in coaching, there are links in the description of this video for booking a call with me. If you're interested in joining a Facebook group of people who are following this approach, there's also a link in the description, and there's a link for my Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.